Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where frost clings to every branch, where breath hangs in the air like tiny ghosts, and where survival itself depends on the faintest flicker of warmth. Imagine yourself trudging through a medieval field, the ground frozen solid beneath your boots, your breath turning to mist as the wind bites at your cheeks. The sun barely rises above the horizon these days, and when it does, it feels weak, as if even the heavens have grown tired of the cold. You pull your cloak tighter, but it doesn't help much. The wool's scratchy, stiff, and smells faintly of smoke. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the dull thud of an axe, someone's cutting firewood. Because in this world, warmth is life. Without it, you're just another frozen shape in the snow. Let's be honest, you wouldn't last a night out here. Seriously, you'd be begging for Wi-Fi, hot chocolate, and central heating within minutes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The frost has already conquered the countryside. Fields that once shimmered with wheat and barley now lie silent, covered in ice. The last harvest ended months ago, and what remains of it is stored deep inside barns or cellars. Every bite of bread, every scrap of meat, must last through the endless stretch of winter. You walk through the frozen stubble, the air so sharp it hurts to breathe. Somewhere, a crow caws, the only creature foolish enough to defy the cold. Medieval farmers didn't have the luxury of winter vacations. When the frost came, they didn't rest, they prepared. Firewood had to be chopped, livestock had to be sheltered, and every drop of water had to be broken free from ice before drinking. You'd see men breaking holes in frozen ponds with iron poles, their hands red and raw, their breath coming in thick puffs. Their wives, wrapped in layers of wool and linen, would gather straw to line the floors of their homes, nature's poor man's insulation. Inside the cottages, it wasn't much better. The air was thick with smoke from the hearth, the only source of heat they had. Chimneys, when they existed, were crude and often clogged. Most houses simply had a hole in the roof to let the smoke escape, which meant the warmth escaped too. The result? You'd wake up with a sore throat and the smell of soot clinging to your hair. And yet, despite all that, people found ways to adapt. They learned where to sit to catch the best heat, how to hang damp clothes near the fire without burning them, and how to sleep close enough to share warmth without suffocating one another. The poor lived with the fire, or died without it. Even the animals played their part. The family cow, the pigs, sometimes even chickens were brought into the house or the adjoining barn. Their body heat, and yes, their smell, helped raise the temperature a few precious degrees. You might wrinkle your nose at the thought, but to a medieval farmer, the scent of livestock meant survival. And then there's the wind. It whistles through every crack in the wall, turning each gust into a cold knife. People stuffed moss, hay, or old rags into the gaps, trying to seal the drafts. Curtains made of coarse linen hung across doors, fluttering whenever someone entered, but the wind always found a way in. You imagine yourself there, crouched beside the hearth, rubbing your hands over the dim orange glow. your breath mixing with the smoke. The light flickers across the rough walls, illuminating tools, baskets, and bundles of herbs hung from the ceiling to dry. Somewhere behind you, someone coughs. The air is thick, heavy, almost chewable. You feel your eyes sting, but you don't move. The fire is too precious to leave. And outside? Silence. Only the occasional creak of frozen wood or the soft groan of ice expanding in a barrel. It's strange, in a world so harsh. There's beauty too. The snow glows faintly under the moonlight. The fields stretch out like silver seas. Unbroken, untouched. The cold is cruel, but it's honest. It makes everything still, everything clear. Medieval winters were long and merciless. Records tell of years when rivers froze solid and entire villages were cut off from the world. People starved, froze, or simply vanished, yet they endured, somehow, through faith, ingenuity, and stubbornness. They survived. Historians still debate how much of that survival was luck, and how much was sheer willpower. You feel the weight of that history now. Each gust of wind outside your imaginary cottage carries the echo of those who once huddled for warmth. Whispering prayers to make it through the night. You can almost hear them, soft voices. Half asleep, murmuring ancient words of hope. And maybe that's the real secret. Not the fire, not the furs, not even the wool socks they spun by hand, but the simple human determination to hold on. To wait for morning, to believe, even in the darkest, coldest night, that spring will come again. As the flames in your mind's hearth burn lower, you settle deeper into that world, where the fields are frozen. The sky is vast, and warmth is not just a temperature, but a feeling. The story of how medieval farmers kept warm begins here, in the silence of a frozen dawn, where every breath is a promise to keep living until the thaw. The air inside that tiny cottage feels heavy, like breathing through a blanket of smoke and damp wool. You shift closer to the hearth, it's barely glowing now. A lazy ember pulsing like a tired heartbeat. Someone has to get up soon to add more wood. But everyone hesitates. The bed of straw is stiff, the blanket rough, and outside the wind is howling with the voice of a hungry wolf. You glance toward the corner where the family's clothes hang, stiff with frost, layer upon layer. They wait for morning. That's the secret of surviving medieval winter, not one thick coat, but many thin ones. Linen shirts, wool tunics, fur-trimmed cloaks, and even straw stuffed between layers. It sounds ridiculous, but straw was a legitimate fashion choice. You could call it the original insulation technology. Though I doubt anyone would have made it onto a runway in Paris dressed like that. You imagine yourself dressing for a medieval morning. First, a rough linen undershirt. It's itchy, but it keeps the wool from scraping your skin. Then a tunic, thick and shapeless. Over that, a cloak, then another cloak, and maybe, if you're lucky, something made of sheepskin. The smell? Oh, it's not great. Think of a damp dog that's been rolling in smoke. But it's warm, and warmth beats elegance every single time. You sit by the fire, pulling your hood tighter, and watch as your breath curls upward. The smoke fills the room again, clinging to every corner, seeping into the very walls. The smell of smoke never really leaves. It becomes part of you. Part of your clothes, part of your story. If someone from the future ever met a medieval farmer, they'd smell him before they saw him. Even so, People cared about appearance, sort of. They knew that layering correctly wasn't just about warmth, it was about survival. Wet clothes could kill faster than hunger. So they dried garments constantly near the fire, turning the room into a chaotic jumble of steaming wool and singed edges. You can almost hear the argument when someone's tunic accidentally catches a spark, a brief panic, a curse, and then laughter. Because what else can you do but laugh when your last decent shirt smells like burnt sheep? Outside, frost gathers on every branch, and the world turns gray and white. A few brave souls still venture out, wrapped so thick they look like walking haystacks. The sound of boots crunching on ice mixes with the barking of dogs and the occasional creak of a wagon wheel. Somewhere, a child's laugh echoes, startling in its brightness against the dull winter air. Even here, in this frozen world, life refuses to stop. You'd notice something odd about the way people move, slowly, deliberately, conserving heat like it's gold. No one wastes energy. Every gesture is careful. Every breath is measured. To move too fast is to invite the cold back in. The farmers have learned that the body itself is a furnace, and all you have to do is keep the heat trapped. Sometimes they'd use grease or animal fat as a sort of poor man's lotion, rubbing it onto their skin to block the wind. It sounds disgusting, but when your face is cracking from frostbite, you stop being picky. There are even records of peasants using soot mixed with oil as a kind of primitive balm. Not exactly your modern skincare routine. But it worked. Historians still debate whether this was common practice or just one of those regional quirks. But one thing's certain, winter made everyone creative. You picture the whole family bundling up before bed, children, parents, even grandparents, all pressed together under heavy blankets of wool and fur. They wore their clothes to sleep, sometimes even their shoes. Taking them off wasn't worth the risk of freezing in your own bed. And if you needed to use the privy in the middle of the night, you didn't. You held it, because outside was death, cold, wet, and merciless. The strange thing is, people found comfort in the discomfort. They joked about it. They sang songs while shivering. They made fun of one another's ridiculous layers. The man who looked like a turnip. The woman whose hood was so big she couldn't see straight. You can almost hear the laughter now. Muffled but warm, bouncing off the cold stone walls. Humor, it seems, was another layer against the cold. You touch your sleeve, rough, thick, scratchy, and imagine the texture of life back then. Nothing was smooth, nothing soft, even the air had edges. And yet, within that harshness, there was something grounding. When you lived through a medieval winter, you didn't just endure the cold, you earned your survival one frozen morning at a time. You think about your own layers now, not wool or straw, but the layers of comfort you take for granted: heated rooms, warm showers, electric blankets. The medieval farmer would have thought you were a wizard. But deep down, both of you share the same instinct, the desire to protect your warmth. Your little flame against the vast, indifferent cold. The fire in the hearth crackles louder now. You toss another log into the embers. Watch the sparks twist and leap like tiny stars. The room glows orange, soft, almost golden. Outside, the wind wails against the shutters. But it can't get in. Not tonight. For now, you're wrapped in layers of wool, smoke, and the quiet triumph of surviving another day. Tomorrow will bring more frost, more cracked fingers, more smoke in your lungs, but also more laughter, more stories, more life, because no matter how many layers it takes, warmth is something you fight for. And every time you pull that cloak tighter, you're not just keeping the cold out, you're keeping hope in. The fire is burning low again. You lean forward, nudging the embers with an iron poker until a small flame licks to life. Trembling like a candle in a storm, the room glows faintly, casting long shadows on the rough wooden beams above your head. In a medieval home, the hearth wasn't just a fireplace, it was the heart, the only pulse of warmth in a world made of ice. Every life revolved around it. The cooking, the storytelling, the drying of clothes, the boiling of water, even the family's cat, if there was one, claimed the best spot right beside it. Curling into a smoky little ball of smug satisfaction. And you'd do the same. You'd stay as close as possible without singeing your eyebrows off. The medieval hearth was a miracle of necessity. Most were built right in the middle of a single room house. With no chimney, just a small hole in the roof to let the smoke escape. Let is a generous word, in truth. Most of the smoke stayed inside, filling the air like fog. You'd cough, your eyes would sting, and your hair would smell like burnt stew for days. But that was a small price to pay for the luxury of heat. You can almost see it, the glow flickering across soot-stained faces. The firewood hissing as moisture burns away. Sparks leap, dance, and die in mid-air like fireflies. Outside, the snow presses against the walls, trying to get in, but here, inside this smoky bubble, there's a tiny pocket of comfort. The crackle of the fire becomes a heartbeat for the whole house. And oh, the meals that came from it. Nothing fancy. No roasted swan or sugar-coated almonds for these farmers. Just thick broth simmering for hours. Made from roots, scraps of salted pork, maybe a handful of barley. The pot stayed over the fire all day. Sometimes for days. The stew evolved with every meal. You never really started fresh. You just kept going. A living soup. In a way, some joked that it was so old it had seen more winters than the family cow. You tear a piece of hard bread and dip it into the pot. The steam rises and warms your face. It tastes earthy, smoky, with a faint hint of something unidentifiable, probably turnip. It's not delicious, but it's enough. In that moment, warmth comes not just from fire, but from the slow rhythm of living, eat, work, rest, repeat. The fire also served another purpose, drying. Everything from damp boots to laundry to herbs hung over it. The ceiling beams were a jungle of dangling things, onions, sausages, linen shirts, even the occasional pair of trousers. You'd better hope they were well tied. Because nothing ruins a romantic dinner faster than your dad's pants catching fire and dropping into the stew. Still, it wasn't just utility. The hearth had a soul. It was sacred. Families prayed before it, celebrated around it, and mourned beside it. In many homes, it was the only constant when the roof leaked, when the cold bit, when hunger gnawed. The fire was there. Some people even believed the spirit of the house lived in the flames. To let it die out carelessly was more than lazy, it was disrespectful. And that's why someone always had to stay up late, poking the embers, feeding it just enough to keep it alive until dawn. That was often you, or at least Your medieval counterpart, eyes heavy, limbs aching, yet unwilling to let the darkness win. You'd sit in silence, listening to the crackle, watching the sparks drift like tiny souls up toward the rafters. Sometimes, the fire brought people together in unexpected ways. Neighbors would visit during storms, bringing a bit of wood or food to share. They'd trade gossip, jokes, and sometimes tall tales, the kind that made children's eyes go wide. Maybe about ghosts in the snow, or witches who could control the frost. And while everyone laughed, their feet stretched out toward the heat, their shoulders relaxed, and for a while, winter didn't seem quite so cruel. Of course, accidents happened. A stray ember could turn a cottage into a funeral pyre in minutes. Fire was life, but it was also danger. People respected it the way sailors respect the sea, with awe and a touch of fear. Every flicker could mean survival or disaster. There's an old saying from that time: "The fire that warms you today may eat your house tomorrow." Grim? Sure, but practical wisdom was the medieval farmer's version of philosophy. You glance again at the flames. They're smaller now, quieter. You feed another stick into the hearth, listening to the hiss as it catches. The warmth creeps back into your fingers. You can almost feel your heartbeat syncing with the fire's rhythm. Slow, steady, patient. Just like life in these frozen lands. Historians still debate whether medieval homes ever truly got warm. Some suggest the temperature inside barely reached above freezing most of the time. Can you imagine that? You're indoors, next to a roaring fire, and you can still see your breath. But perhaps warmth wasn't measured in degrees. Maybe it was measured in laughter, in shared meals, in the comfort of knowing you weren't alone in the cold. You picture the scene again, the glow of embers, the soft breathing of those asleep nearby, the distant howl of the wind outside. The world may be frozen solid beyond those walls. But here, in the orange light of the hearth, there's still a life. You lie down near the fire, wrapping your cloak around you, your back pressed to the straw bed. The heat seeps into your bones. Slow but steady. Tomorrow will bring more work, chopping wood, mending fences, feeding animals, but for now, you let the rhythm of the crackling logs lull you. The heart of the home beats on, soft and steady, a promise whispered in the smoke: stay alive. Spring will come. You wake before dawn, the cold biting at your face like a mischievous spirit. The fire has died down again, just a faint orange glow beneath the ash. You reach out, your fingers brushing the rough stones of the hearth, and stir the embers carefully. A few sparks leap to life. Defiant little suns in a world of frost. You add a stick of wood, then another, until the faint crackle returns. The rest of the house begins to stir. Someone groans under a mountain of blankets. A baby whimpers softly. Then, a sound that would warm even the iciest heart, the soft bleating of a sheep from outside. Followed by the steady creak of the barn door. The animals are waking too. But before anyone goes out, there's one thing every medieval farmer knew: the night's cold lingers. And the warmth of sleep must be shared a little longer. So, for a few precious moments each morning, the family stays close together, not out of laziness, but out of wisdom. Heat shared is heat saved. It's strange to imagine, but families in medieval winters often slept side by side, parents, children, sometimes even servants, all in one bed or on one large pile of straw and wool. Privacy wasn't a concept, warmth was. The bed wasn't just for sleeping, it was for surviving. You can picture it, a jumble of limbs, snores, and blankets, the youngest pressed between parents for extra warmth, the older kids curled up near the edge, and maybe even the dog tucked at their feet. The bed creaks, the straw rustles, and someone mutters sleepily about stealing the blanket. A normal morning in a medieval household. There's something oddly comforting about it, isn't there? In a world where death waited behind every gust of wind. This closeness, this tangle of bodies and breath, was a quiet rebellion. The cold could take your crops, your livestock, even your home, but it couldn't take your warmth if you kept it together. Some families even shared their sleeping space with animals. Calves, goats, sometimes pigs, all curled near the doorway, their bodies giving off precious heat. The smell wasn't exactly pleasant, but imagine it. A cow shifting its weight beside the hearth. Its slow breathing steady as a lullaby. The air thick with smoke, hay, and life. Historians still debate how common it was for people and animals to share living quarters. But the evidence, soot-covered ceilings, animal hair in the floor straw, suggests it happened often. The line between house and barn was blurry. And warmth didn't care about boundaries. You glance around the small room, the flicker of the rekindled fire. The uneven walls coated in soot. The frost glittering on the inside of the window shutters. Someone stretches, yawns, and begins pulling on their clothes, which, of course, they'd been wearing all night. In winter, you never took off what you didn't have to. The daily rhythm starts slowly. A mother tends to the baby, rocking gently by the hearth. The eldest son heads outside to fetch water, breaking the thin crust of ice at the top of the bucket. You can almost hear the hollow echo of the frozen water as he cracks it open. The father checks the animals, his boots crunching on the hard-packed snow. Steam rises from the cow's breath, warm and white against the blue dawn. Inside, the rest of the family begins to move. Someone stirs the pot from last night's stew. Someone else feeds the fire with another armful of wood. The cottage comes alive again. Every movement small but essential. And through it all, the warmth is a fragile thread. The fire must not go out. The bodies must stay close. Even laughter serves a purpose. It keeps the spirit warm. So, you find humor in the absurdity. The way your nose freezes while your back sweats from the fire's heat. Or how you can never quite escape the smell of sheep. There's a certain rhythm to this life, cold, warmth, cold again. Every night, the family piles together. Every morning, they emerge, sleepy but alive. And every evening, they'll do it all over again. You start to realize that warmth isn't just a condition, it's a ritual. They even had superstitions about it. Some believed that the spirits of winter, invisible beings of frost and mist, could slip into your home if the bed was empty or cold. So you never left it unmade. You kept the covers heavy, tucked, warm, not just for comfort, but as protection. You look at your own imaginary bed now. The straw poking through the blanket. The scent of smoke still clinging to it. It's rough, itchy, imperfect, but you understand why it mattered so much. In that shared space, you belonged to something, to each other, to survival, to the rhythm of winter itself. And as the morning light creeps through the cracks in the shutters, painting thin golden lines across the faces still half asleep, you feel a strange sense of calm. This isn't luxury. It isn't comfort. It's connection. The kind you can only find when the world outside is trying to freeze you solid. One of the children stirs, sneezes, and burrows deeper into the blankets. The mother laughs softly. The father enters, his beard frosted white, carrying a small log under each arm. He places them by the hearth, muttering something about how the fire eats faster than we do. And he's right. Fire consumes endlessly, wood, breath, effort, and yet it gives back just enough to keep life going. You sit there a moment longer, watching the family's morning unfold. It's ordinary, repetitive, imperfect, but it's also sacred. Each small act, stoking the fire, sharing a blanket, pouring warm broth, is an offering to survival. In this frozen world, warmth doesn't just come from the hearth or the clothes or the animals. It comes from the simple act of staying close, of breathing together through another cold morning. Whispering, "We made it." And when night falls again, when frost creeps back through the cracks and the wind sings its lonely song outside, they'll all return to that same bed, human, animal, heart to heart, sharing warmth, laughter, and the stubborn will to live until spring finally remembers them. By midday, the frost outside glitters like a sea of glass. But inside, the warmth you fought so hard to keep is already slipping away. The fire burns low again, always low, and the chill creeps back through the stone walls like a patient intruder. The cottage may look sturdy from the outside, with its thick limestone and timber frame. But here's the truth medieval farmers learned fast. Stone keeps out the rain, but not the cold. You run your hand along the wall, it's damp, cold enough to sting your fingertips. You can almost feel the frost trying to crawl through the cracks. The stones sweat in winter, dark patches forming where moisture seeps through. People called it the wall's breath, but really it was just another reminder that comfort was a rare luxury. Still, the walls stood strong, thick and heavy, sometimes over a meter wide. They were built to last, not to keep you cozy. You could light a fire all day, and the heat would never reach the corners. You'd sit close to the hearth, your front roasting while your back froze. A perfect medieval version of a malfunctioning heater. The roofs didn't help much either. Most were thatched, layers of straw piled high. Good for shedding rain but terrible for trapping warmth. Birds nested there, and sometimes snakes. In the worst winters, frost crept through from above, forming thin white webs across the rafters. You might wake up in the morning to find your blanket crusted with ice, from your own breath freezing overnight. Romantic, right? The floors were packed dirt, hard as stone by January. Some families laid down straw or rushes to soften it, changing them every few weeks when they began to rot or smell, though few weeks might be optimistic. More often, the floor became a living ecosystem, herbs, crumbs, bones, and whatever the cat dragged in. The smell of the house was complicated. Smoke, sweat, animals, old stew, wet wool, a symphony of survival. You think about your own home now, with its insulation, double-glazed windows, and thermostats you can adjust with your phone. A medieval farmer would think you were living in heaven, and you'd still complain about it being too cold in the morning. Perspective is everything. The funny thing is, people back then thought about warmth differently. They didn't expect to be comfortable, they expected to endure. They measured success not in luxury, but in how long the firewood lasted. Warm meant not dead. It was a simpler, grimmer calculus, but it worked. Even so, some tried clever tricks. They plastered walls with clay mixed with straw to block drafts. They hung heavy woolen tapestries to trap heat, the medieval version of wall insulation. Wealthier homes might even have wooden paneling, which helped a little. The poor, though, had to make do with what they could scavenge. Old clothes, sacks, reeds, anything that could plug a hole or soften the bite of wind. And oh, the wind, that endless, howling presence that never seemed to stop. It found every crack, every gap, every flaw. You'd be sitting by the fire, thinking you were safe, when suddenly a cold finger of air brushed your neck, like the ghost of winter itself. People used to say the wind carried spirits, that the moaning sound was lost souls wandering. It's not hard to believe when you've heard it yourself in the dead of night, rattling the shutters and whispering through the thatch. But for all the cold, for all the discomfort, there was something strangely beautiful about those houses. They were handmade, every beam and stone placed by someone's own hands. You could trace the story of a family through the walls, a new layer of plaster here, a patched crack there. The marks of countless winters survived. Sometimes, during the rare quiet evenings when the wind died down and the fire glowed steady, you could almost feel the house breathing with you. The stones held the memory of all the warmth they'd absorbed, and they gave a little back, just enough to remind you that you weren't alone. Historians still debate how effective these early houses really were at keeping people warm. Some suggest they stayed just above freezing inside. Others believe the heat from fires, people, and animals could raise it to something closer to comfort. But whatever the truth, you can be sure of one thing: no one in a medieval winter ever took warmth for granted. Imagine yourself sitting there now, wrapped in a cloak, your back to the wall. You lean against the cold stone. But it's not cruel, just steady. Ancient. You listen to the faint hiss of the fire, the slow drip of water from melting frost, the murmur of voices from the next room. Every sound feels amplified in the stillness. Someone laughs quietly. Maybe the father tells a story, something about how, years ago, the wind blew the roof clean off and they slept in the barn with the animals. Everyone laughs, shaking their heads. It's a bitter memory softened by time. In the firelight, their faces glow gold, their eyes bright despite the cold. You realize then that warmth isn't just a physical thing. It's in the laughter, in the shared memory, in the way people sit close even when they could spread out. The walls may be cold, but the people inside, they burn bright. Outside, the world remains silent, wrapped in snow. The walls hold firm, old guardians against the endless winter. Inside, you watch the family settle closer to the fire again, their shadows dancing against the cold stone, their voices soft and steady. And as you close your eyes, you understand something timeless. No matter how thick the walls or how fierce the frost, it's not the fire that keeps a home warm, it's the people who gather around it. You glance toward the small window, or at least, the thing that's supposed to be a window. It's barely more than a square cut into the wall. covered by a thin flap of cloth or a stretched piece of animal hide. No glass. Of course, that luxury was reserved for cathedrals and castles. Here, the goal wasn't to see the world, but to keep it out. The hide is stiff with frost, its edges curling inward where the cold has bitten deep. In daylight, a weak gray glow seeps through, enough to tell morning from night but little more. You reach out and touch it, feeling how brittle it's become. If you push too hard, it might crack. That's what winter does, it makes even light fragile. Windows, if you can call them that, were the enemy of warmth. Every crack, every hole, every seam was a door for the cold to sneak in. Some farmers stuffed the gaps with rags, moss, or straw. Others simply nailed boards across them and lived half-blind until spring. Imagine spending months in dim twilight, your only illumination coming from the fire, flickering, orange, alive. You sit back and watch as a gust of wind rattles the shutters. The hide flaps once, twice, then falls still. The room sighs, as if exhaling through weary lungs. Somewhere, a droplet of melted frost runs down the wall and lands in the ashes with a soft hiss. In the corner, a woman is weaving cloth by hand, slow, deliberate, patient. Her fingers are red from the cold, but her movements are steady. The fabric she's making will be hung across the window later. An extra layer of defense against the wind. In a world without glass, fabric was the next best thing. Thick linen or wool could block the draft, though it also blocked the light. But who needs light when the cold can't reach you? Of course, sometimes the windows froze from the inside. The moisture in the air turned to ice crystals that crawled over the surface, forming delicate white ferns. Children traced them with their fingers, whispering that the ice fairies had visited during the night. You imagine that now, the soft awe of it. Even in hardship, beauty still found its way in, even if it came disguised as frost. You can almost smell the air, smoky, damp, full of earth and wool. Someone opens the door for a moment, letting in a gust of icy wind. The whole room groans in protest. A few sparks jump from the hearth. Startled, the door slams shut again, and silence returns. It's a silence that hums, thick with life. You think of how different that silence would sound compared to your world. No hum of electricity, no traffic, no phones, just breath, crackling fire, the faint rustle of straw. Even the smallest sound carries meaning here. The whistle of the wind through the window isn't just weather, it's presence. It reminds you that the world is vast and cold and waiting. The farmers knew this too. They didn't fight the cold so much as negotiate with it. They built their homes facing away from the prevailing winds, and their windows small, so the light wouldn't come at the cost of warmth. Some even used parchment, treated animal skin stretched thin, to let in light while keeping out drafts. It wasn't perfect, but it worked well enough. Historians still debate how effective those makeshift windows really were. Some claim they made little difference. Others argue they were crucial for keeping the fire smoke in balance, not too much, not too little, too sealed, and the house would choke, too open, and the family would freeze. Life in winter was a constant balance between suffocation and frostbite. You glance again at the faint light filtering through the hide. It's so dim that the edges of the room melt into shadow. The fire flickers, painting everything in soft gold and orange. You can see dust floating in the air, tiny specks catching the light like stars trapped indoors. There's something strangely peaceful about it. The family has gathered again, as they always do when the cold thickens. Someone hums a song, low and slow. More vibration than melody. The tune winds through the air like smoke, twining around the sound of the crackling wood. A child hums along, off-key, and everyone laughs softly. The window rattles again, jealous of the warmth inside. There's a saying that dates back to those times. Better a small light that stays than a great window that freezes. It meant more than architecture, it was a philosophy. You don't need grand openings to face the world. Just a small flame, tended carefully, is enough to keep you alive through the storm. You sit quietly, listening to the wind clawing at the walls. The fire burns lower, but the room feels safe. The light may be faint, but it's warm, and that, in this frozen world, is everything. And as you close your eyes, you can almost imagine the old walls whispering, their stones murmuring stories of other winters, other families, other fires that once flickered here. They've all come and gone, but the light remains, fragile and eternal, shining through whatever window the cold hasn't yet claimed. The smell of bread reaches you first, faint, smoky, comforting. Someone's baking again. You sit up, rubbing your arms, and listen to the low hum of the morning routine unfolding around you. The fire has been rekindled. The air is thick with heat and wood smoke. And in the center of it all, a pot simmers lazily beside a flat stone used for baking. Food, in winter, isn't just nourishment, it's warmth in disguise. Medieval farmers knew that better than anyone. The fire didn't only heat the home, it fed the body from the inside out. Every meal was a small victory against the cold, a promise that you could make it through another day. You shuffle closer, your breath mixing with the rising steam. The woman of the house kneads dough made from coarse rye flour, dark, dense, and heavy. The grain was stored months ago, carefully measured to last until spring. Each loaf that comes from it feels like a gift wrestled from the earth itself. The bread bakes on a flat stone near the hearth, turning crisp and blackened at the edges. It's not soft or fluffy, it's solid, practical, and meant to last. You take a piece in your hand, it's warm, but hard enough to break a tooth. You have to soak it in broth before eating, letting the steam soften it. The broth is made from whatever the family has managed to save: onions, leeks, bits of salted meat, and root vegetables that have somehow survived the cellar. The smell is simple but alive. And when you take that first sip, the heat floods your chest like sunlight. There's no such thing as a quick meal here. Everything takes time, effort, and patience. The bread needs to rise slowly, the stew to simmer all day. Even the waiting becomes part of the ritual of warmth. You can almost feel the rhythm of it. Stir, knead, taste, add a log to the fire. Stir again. When you think about it, food was one of the few things that made winter bearable. It filled not only the stomach but the space, the scent of baking bread, the bubbling sound of a pot, the crackle of fat in a pan. Even if you were freezing, your senses could still be warmed. Children would gather close to the hearth, not just to stay warm, but to watch. Cooking was entertainment, survival, and storytelling all at once. The parents might tease them with jokes: if you don't behave, The stew will jump out and chase you. And the little ones would laugh, their breath misting in the air. It wasn't always so cheerful, of course. Food shortages were common, and hunger was an unwelcome winter guest. When stores ran low, people grew creative, boiling old bones, making soups from cabbage leaves or even tree bark. There are grim records of famine winters where families mixed ground acorns into flour just to stretch it further. Historians still debate whether that actually worked or merely dulled the hunger. But in those times, doing something felt better than doing nothing. Still, even in scarcity, people clung to tradition. On certain feast days, like Christmas or Candlemas, they might treat themselves to a special meal, a thicker stew, a piece of salted fish, maybe a small pie if the larder was kind. For a moment, the world felt normal again. The cold outside could rage and howl. But inside, they had warmth, laughter, and the illusion of plenty. You can almost imagine one of those nights now. The family sits around the fire, passing bowls of broth and chunks of bread. The steam fogs the small window, turning the world outside into a blur. Someone makes a toast, not with wine, but with a cup of hot ale or watered cider. It burns the throat, but it warms the belly. And everyone smiles as if it were the finest drink in the kingdom. It's strange how something as simple as bread can mean so much. You tear another piece in your mind, watching the crumbs fall into the straw floor. The crackling sound of the fire fills the room. The broth bubbles. Life, for all its hardship, continues. A cat sneaks near the hearth, tail flicking. Someone tosses it a piece of crust, and it disappears into the shadows. There's something timeless about this scene. Warmth shared in small ways. Across generations, you think of your own comfort food. The things that make winter bearable for you: hot chocolate, soup, maybe even takeout noodles. For them, it was this: bread and broth, patience and faith. The conversation turns to small things: how the snow drifted against the barn door, how the neighbor's cow escaped again, how the wind has changed direction. Little details that fill the silence and make the walls feel less close. The children listen, half dreaming, while the adults' voices hum like a lullaby. It occurs to you that this is what survival really looked like: not heroic, not dramatic, but steady. A loaf of bread, a bowl of soup, a circle of warmth in the middle of endless white. The farmers didn't conquer winter, they endured it, one meal at a time. As the last piece of bread is eaten and the pot scrapes empty, someone stirs the fire again. The flames rise, painting the walls gold. The air smells of smoke and satisfaction. The cold is still waiting outside, it always is, but for now. The family is full, the house is warm, and the night ahead doesn't feel quite so long. You take one last breath of that smoky air and let it out slowly. The taste of bread and broth lingering on your tongue. Survival has never been a feast, but sometimes, even a little warmth can feel like a banquet. By the time darkness settles again, the rhythm of the day slows to a hush. The family moves through their nightly routine with the quiet precision of people who have done this 1,000 times. The fire is fed, the stew pot pulled aside, and fresh straw is spread over the floor where the bed will be made anew. You crouch down to watch, handfuls of straw tossed, fluffed, and flattened into a makeshift mattress. It rustles under every touch, dry and faintly sweet-smelling. Over it goes a coarse sheet of linen, worn soft from years of washing. And then the heavy wool blankets, thick as armor. It's not luxurious, but it's alive with a kind of rustic care. Bedtime in the medieval world wasn't just the end of the day, it was a defense strategy. People didn't sleep for comfort, they slept to preserve body heat. The great bedtime routine, they might have called it, though no one back then would have found it amusing. Still, watching them now, you realize it's almost ceremonial. The father checks the door latch. The mother banks the fire, not too much. Just enough to smolder through the night. Too much flame and the smoke would choke them, too little. And the frost would creep back in. She stirs the embers, then covers them gently with ash, creating a gray cocoon that will keep a hidden glow alive until dawn. It's like tucking in a sleeping child. The children are already half asleep, bundled together under the heaviest blanket. Their cheeks are pink from the fire's fading warmth. The mother hums something soft, a tune without words. More vibration than melody. You can hear the timbre of her voice, the steady rhythm of breathing filling the room. You slip under the same covers in your imagination, feeling the scratch of wool and the crunch of straw beneath you. It's surprisingly comforting, the weight of the blankets pressing down like a promise. There's no space wasted, everyone fits together snugly. Shoulder to shoulder, heart to heartbeat, the heat builds quickly, trapped beneath layers of fabric and fatigue. The father lies closest to the door, just in case the wind blows it open or a curious fox tries to nose its way in. It's a small gesture, but it says everything. Protection comes first. Even in sleep, you can sense his presence. Solid and quiet, the faint sound of his breathing blending with the occasional snap from the hearth. The air is thick with familiar smells, smoke, wool, sweat, and the faint tang of the animals outside. The cows shift in the adjoining stall, their movements dull and steady. Every sound feels part of the same symphony, one made not by instruments, but by life itself enduring. Historians still debate how much people truly slept during medieval winters. Some believe they followed a two-sleep pattern, one long rest after sunset, then a period of wakefulness in the middle of the night before returning to bed. It makes sense here, with the fire to tend and the long, silent hours stretching endlessly. You can imagine someone waking at midnight, stirring the coals, whispering prayers, or simply lying still, listening to the breathing of those around them. You open your eyes in that imagined darkness. The only light comes from the faint orange pulse of the hearth, the same glow that guided them through the day. The shadows dance gently across the ceiling, turning every beam into a flickering constellation. For a moment, the boundary between waking and dreaming blurs. Someone stirs beside you, pulling the blanket tighter. Another coughs softly. Then stillness returns. Outside, the wind sighs against the walls. A slow exhale of winter itself. You find yourself listening not for danger, but for reassurance, the quiet rhythm that means everything is still alive. A mouse skitters across the floor somewhere. The dog grumbles in its sleep. The baby lets out a small cry, and the mother's hand immediately finds it, soothing with gentle murmurs. The warmth spreads again, not just from bodies, but from presence, that unspoken knowledge that you are surrounded, protected, connected. There's humor even in the discomfort. Someone mutters about the straw poking through the blanket. The father grumbles back, half asleep, something about how it's better than snow. A few sleepy chuckles ripple through the dark. Even in exhaustion, laughter survives, the last small fire before true rest. You start to drift, lulled by the slow harmony of life in this small room. The cold outside is absolute. But here inside, there's a different kind of weather, a climate of warmth made from human closeness. You realize that this nightly ritual isn't just about sleeping. It's about faith, faith that you'll wake up, that the fire will still glow, that spring is one day closer. And when you finally close your eyes, you do so knowing that somewhere deep beneath the ashes, a single ember waits for morning, silent, stubborn, eternal, just like them, just like you. The night passes without incident, though you hear the faint groan of the wind pressing against the walls, as if testing their resolve. By morning, frost flowers have bloomed across the doorframe, delicate, crystalline, and mercilessly cold. The fire, faithful as ever, still smolders in its bed of ash, waiting for someone to stir it back to life. You crawl out from under the blankets and pull on your cloak. The air bites immediately, sharp as broken glass. You can see your breath, long and white, curling into the dim room like incense. From outside comes a familiar chorus, the restless shuffling of animals, the muffled thud of hooves, the faint whimper of something cold and alive. Today, the work begins not in the fields, they're frozen solid, but in the barn. Keeping the animals warm isn't kindness. It's survival. Without them, there will be no milk, no plowing, no food when spring returns. So you step out into the white light of dawn, your boots crunching through snow, your breath steady, your heart ready for another battle with the cold. The barn stands close to the cottage, built that way for a reason. The walls are thick, the roof low, to trap the heat of the bodies inside. You push the door open, and the smell hits you, a heavy blend of hay, manure, and life. It's pungent, yes, but strangely comforting. Warm air rolls out, thick and damp, carrying the sound of snorts, clucks, and soft lowing. Inside, the animals huddle together. The cow's breath steams like smoke from a small volcano. Chickens rustle in their straw nests, their feathers puffed up against the chill. A pair of pigs shift lazily, their sides heaving in rhythm. You can almost feel the temperature rise just by standing among them. It's not glamorous, this work. You lift frozen buckets, break ice from the troughs, and scatter hay from bales that smell faintly of summer long gone. The straw crunches under your boots, and your fingers ache as you work, numb from the cold and the weight of the water. But you keep moving. Motion, you've learned, is the only real heat you can count on. The father moves among the stalls, murmuring softly to the animals. "Easy now," he says, rubbing the cow's flank, his breath clouding in the air. "You're warmer than we are, old girl." The animal blinks slowly, unbothered, as if she knows it's true. In winter, beasts and humans share a kind of unspoken truce, a pact of warmth and endurance. The children follow behind, giggling as they chase a hen that refuses to stay put. The mother calls from the doorway, warning them not to slip, though her voice carries a laugh. Even here, in the biting cold, there's something almost joyful in the chaos. Maybe it's the simple relief of motion, of doing something that keeps the blood moving and the mind off the frost. Historians have long debated whether medieval farmers truly kept their livestock so close to their living quarters. But the evidence says yes. Warmth was too precious to waste. The walls between barn and home were often shared, letting heat seep from one life to another. It was practical, and in its own earthy way, it was poetic. You can imagine it now. Lying in bed at night, hearing the slow breathing of the cow through the wall, the occasional shuffle of hooves, the snort of a horse. The sounds weren't a nuisance, they were reassurance. Proof that life, against all odds, still moved nearby. And yet, there were problems too. The smell was constant, the air thick with smoke and animal musk. Parasites thrived in the damp straw, and illness could spread quickly. But no one complained. They didn't have the luxury. They understood something simple and profound. Warmth has a price, and it's worth paying. Back in the barn, the chores continue. The family moves in a quiet rhythm, feeding, cleaning, checking, mending. You help stack firewood against the wall. The bark rough under your hands. Each log means another night of safety. When it's finally done, the father stands in the doorway, looking out at the frozen landscape. His breath hangs in the air, joining the smoke from the cottage chimney. "We'll last another day," he says softly, more to himself than anyone else. The mother smiles faintly. "We've lasted worse," she replies. "It's not boasting, it's fact." The children run past, leaving small boot prints in the snow. The pig snorts approvingly. The cow flicks her tail. The world seems, for a brief moment, to hold its breath. You linger a little longer in the barn, feeling the odd, gentle warmth that lingers among the animals. It's not the clean heat of a fire, nor the biting heat of the forge, it's a living warmth. Made of breath and bodies and shared struggle. The kind that humbles you. The kind that reminds you that survival is never a solo act. As you step back into the cold, the door creaks shut behind you, sealing in that small world of steam and straw. The wind meets you like an old rival, sharp, demanding, relentless, but you carry the barn's warmth with you. Faint but real, like a secret ember tucked beneath your ribs. The cottage stands ahead, smoke curling from the chimney like a signal to the sky. We're still here. You push the door open, step inside, and close out the wind. The family is already gathering around the fire again. Cheeks flushed, hands raw but happy. The mother ladles broth into bowls. The father feeds the flame. The children laugh at nothing at all. Outside, the frost tightens its grip. Inside, life endures, steaming, snorting, laughing, breathing, the beasts and the people. The fire and the straw, all woven together in one fragile, beautiful fight against the cold. By now, the firewood pile is shrinking fast. You can see the father glance toward it more often, a small, unspoken worry behind his eyes. Every log burned tonight is a log that won't be there tomorrow. Every spark, though warm, carries a whisper of cost. You sit by the hearth and feel the tension in the air. The fire still burns, but lower now, more careful. It's no longer a blaze of comfort, it's a negotiation. Each stick of wood must be earned, measured, stretched. The warmth has become precious, almost sacred. Wood and fuel, in the medieval winter, were as valuable as gold. In fact, sometimes more so. You couldn't eat gold, and it didn't keep your children from freezing. People traded, begged, even stole for firewood. A well-stocked pile meant survival, an empty one meant prayer. And when the forests grew bare, desperation took root. The Father knows this. You can see it in the way he studies the fire. His hands hovering over it like a man counting coins. The flames flicker in his eyes, soft orange. Deep shadow. He sighs, rubs his calloused fingers, then tosses in a small piece of wood. It hisses, smokes, catches, and the warmth returns. For now, the children are too young to notice the change. They sit near the fire, toasting bits of bread on long sticks, laughing when the crumbs fall into the coals. The mother pretends not to mind, though you can tell she's thinking the same thing as her husband. How much longer can the wood last? It's strange how something so simple, a burning log, could rule a family's fate. You think of your own heating now, turned on with a button, invisible, constant, but here, every degree of warmth is paid for with sweat and time. Historians often talk about the wood crisis of medieval Europe, a slow, creeping disaster as forests vanished from overuse. People cut faster than the trees could grow back. In towns, firewood became a luxury. In villages, it became a reason for feuds. The poor gathered fallen branches, dry roots, even animal dung to burn. The rich built walls to keep them out of their forests. Sometimes, in the deep cold, families had to make cruel choices: burn the last of the wood, or keep it for cooking tomorrow. Use the last candle, or sit in darkness. Warmth, in this world, was not guaranteed. It was rationed, prayed for, and fought over. You hear the father mutter something under his breath. The mother nods. Tomorrow, he'll go farther for wood, beyond the river, into the woods where the snow hides fallen branches. It's dangerous, but necessary. He sharpens his axe before bed, the sound of the whetstone scraping echoing through the small room, a sound like preparation, or defiance. The fire burns lower, reduced to glowing coals. The light flickers across the family's faces, making them look older, more worn. The youngest child curls up in a blanket, already asleep. The mother watches him for a moment, her eyes soft but tired. She pulls the blanket tighter around his shoulders and whispers something, not a prayer exactly, but close enough. Then, unexpectedly, the father chuckles. Remember the winter of '03? He says. When we burned the cartwheels. The mother laughs, a dry, genuine laugh that shakes the tension from the air. She says, and your brother said the cart rolled better as smoke. You can't help but smile. Even in scarcity, humor is a kind of wealth. The children wake enough to ask what's funny. And soon the story becomes a full retelling. How they ran out of wood one year and burned everything that wasn't nailed down. Even the old chair, it squealed. The father jokes, like it didn't want to go. Laughter fills the room again. It's soft, exhausted, but it's warmth of a different kind. The kind that doesn't consume, but multiplies. Still, when the laughter fades, the reality remains. The night will be long, and the cold will press hard. The father banks the fire carefully, laying the biggest log they have left. He watches it catch slowly. Reluctantly, it will need to last until dawn. You feel the heat on your face, faint, comforting, alive. Outside, the wind is rising, flinging snow against the walls. The sound is like waves crashing on a frozen shore. Inside, the family sits closer, shoulders touching, eyes on the same small flame. It occurs to you that the price of warmth isn't just wood, it's faith, patience, and the willingness to give more than you think you have. They've traded comfort for endurance, laughter for firewood, fear for one more day of light. Historians can measure wood supply, estimate temperature, debate efficiency, but they can't measure the sound of that laughter, or the way hope flickers in the glow of a dying log. Those things don't leave traces in the record, but they're real as frost on a window or smoke in your lungs. As the family settles in for the night, the father stares into the fire one last time. You can almost hear his thoughts, not words, but feelings, gratitude, exhaustion, defiance. The flames shrink but refuse to die, mirroring him perfectly. And when he finally leans back, closes his eyes, and lets the fire hum quietly in the dark, you understand something simple and eternal. Warmth isn't free, it's earned, every single night. The next morning begins with a soft light and a softer sound. The wind has stopped. It's a rare thing in winter. This silence, as if the world itself is taking a breath. When you open the door, the air hits you with a bite. But it's calm. Snow stretches unbroken across the fields, glittering under the weak sun like powdered glass. You step outside, your boots sinking with a muffled crunch. And for the first time in days, you can hear birds, faint, distant, but real. It's too cold to feel like hope, but it sounds like it. In the village, the cold spares no one. You see smoke curling from a few chimneys, thin and hesitant, every home conserving what wood remains. But today, the father carries something new on his face, resolve. He's heading out to help a neighbor. You follow in your imagination as he trudges down the snow-laden path, his axe slung over his shoulder. The neighbor's cottage is smaller, older, its roof sagging under snow. Inside, an old widow sits by an almost dead fire, her hands trembling around an empty bowl. The father steps in, stamping off snow, and without a word, sets down his bundle of firewood. "You'll need this more than I will," he says simply. She protests. Of course, everyone does when pride meets kindness, but he insists. He chops her wood right there, his axe ringing through the frozen air. Each strike is like a heartbeat against silence. Soon the fire crackles again, painting her face with color. The old woman wipes her eyes and whispers a blessing. "May your hearth never go cold." When he returns home, his fingers are numb, but his spirit is lighter. The mother looks up, knowing without asking. She sets another bowl of broth for him, though there's hardly enough for everyone. The children listen as he tells the story. How the widow smiled when the fire caught again. How the cottage smelled of life instead of cold. "That's warmth," he says quietly, "the kind that doesn't run out." The children don't fully understand, but they nod solemnly, as if they do. You realize then that in this frozen world, generosity was the only kind of wealth that multiplied. People helped one another because they had no other choice, and because, in helping, they remembered they were still human. Neighbors shared everything: wood, bread, blankets, even prayers. When someone's chimney stopped smoking, it wasn't gossip that followed, it was footsteps. You can almost see it now, villagers walking from house to house, checking on one another in the dim light. A knock at a door. A quick trade. We've got broth. You've got turnips. Take some straw. Your bed's too thin. They didn't call it charity. They called it survival. Historians often note how rural communities in the Middle Ages depended on cooperation more than any written law. Lords and kings ruled from afar. But in the cold months, only the warmth of neighbors mattered. The smallest act, a shared log, a borrowed pot, a handful of grain, could decide who saw spring. And yet, there was pride, too. Farmers didn't want to seem needy. They'd give before they'd ask. There's something noble in that, a quiet, unspoken honor that bound them together. You think about it as you watch the family around their fire that evening. The father is sharpening tools again. The mother mends a torn sleeve. The children whisper about the lady with the smile of smoke. Outside, the frost returns. It always does. But inside, there's something different tonight, an invisible warmth that lingers beyond the firelight. You can feel it in the way they move slower, speak softer, smile longer. The room isn't any warmer, but it feels warmer, and that's what matters. The father leans back and tells another story. This one older. Long ago, he says, a poor man shared his fire with a stranger who had none. When the man returned home, his fire had not gone out, it had doubled. That's how warmth works. You give it away, and it comes back twice as strong. The children ask if it's true. He shrugs. Maybe, maybe not, but it's worth trying, isn't it? The mother smiles at him over the rim of her bowl. The candle burns low, the shadows stretch long, and for a while, no one speaks. The fire crackles softly, as if in agreement. You think about modern warmth, heating bills, electric blankets, glowing screens, comforts that ask for nothing in return. Yet here, in this tiny cottage, warmth is a conversation, passed hand to hand, word to word, like bread at the table. When the night deepens, the father stirs the fire one last time. The room glows amber. The mother hums a lullaby. Something slow and low. The children drift to sleep, their faces peaceful in the flickering light. Outside, the stars shimmer like frost scattered across the sky. The father whispers again, half prayer, half promise. May every hearth stay burning. It's not a wish for himself. It's for everyone, for the widow down the road, for the neighbors across the frozen field, for strangers he'll never meet. Because in this age of endless cold, the true fire isn't the one in the hearth. It's the one that passes from heart to heart. Invisible, unstoppable, and just warm enough to keep the world alive. The sky has turned the color of pewter, heavy and endless, as snow begins to fall again, soft, steady, and without mercy. By now, the family doesn't bother to curse it. The snow has become a fact of life, like the ache in their hands or the creak in the door hinges. You open the shutters just enough to peer outside, and the world has vanished into white. The fields, the path, the fence, all gone, swallowed by silence. And yet, it's Sunday. That means something. No matter the cold, no matter the storm, faith still calls. The family bundles in layer after layer, wool, linen, leather, fur, until they resemble walking haystacks. The father wraps a scarf around his face, leaving only his eyes visible. The mother ties her cloak with twine and tucks her children under her arms like small parcels. God sees effort. She murmurs, half to herself, half to the sky. You join them in spirit as they step outside. The wind greets you instantly, cutting through every layer, finding every gap. The path to the church is only a faint suggestion beneath the snow. Each step is a slow, crunching prayer, one foot after another, pushing forward through the white. The bells ring faintly in the distance, muffled by the storm. The sound is weak but beautiful, a promise in metal. For a moment, you think of how absurd it is. People walking miles through frost and wind just to kneel in a stone building colder than their own homes. But then you realize that's the point. Faith isn't comfort, it's commitment. The church stands on a small hill at the edge of the village. Its walls gray and weathered, its steeple leaning like an old man. You step inside, and the air is even colder than outside. But it's a sacred cold, one that demands stillness. Candles flicker on the altar, their flames small but steady, fighting against the chill that seeps through the stone. The villagers gather in silence. You can see the frost on their cloaks, the snow melting in their hair, the red on their cheeks. They kneel on the hard floor, whispering prayers that rise like mist into the rafters. The priest's breath fogs as he speaks. Winter tests the faithful, he says, but spring is the reward for those who endure. You can almost feel the collective sigh ripple through the crowd, part belief, part exhaustion. Outside, the snow continues to fall, pressing against the stained glass, dimming the light. The church feels like a ship adrift in a sea of white. And yet, the candle flames hold steady, each one a tiny declaration that hope still burns. After the sermon, the people linger. They share food, a crust of bread here, a piece of dried apple there. Someone passes around a flask of ale, and it burns like fire down the throat. Laughter returns, small but defiant. You can tell they don't come to church just for God. They come for each other, for warmth, for conversation, for the reminder that no one is alone in the frost. When it's time to leave, the family steps back into the storm. The snow is deeper now, the wind sharper, but their pace is lighter. The father carries the youngest on his shoulders. The mother hums a hymn, and the older children toss handfuls of snow at each other, laughing despite the cold. By the time they reach home, the cottage feels almost tropical in comparison. The fire is coaxed back to life. The wet cloaks hung near the hearth, and steam begins to rise from them like ghosts departing. The smell of smoke and wool fills the air. The father rubs his hands and grins. "We made it there and back," he says. "That's enough miracle for one day." The mother nods, her cheeks glowing from the cold. She ladles the last of the stew into bowls and says a quiet blessing over it. The children eat quickly, their faces lit by the firelight. Outside, the wind howls, but no one seems to mind. You sit there, watching, and realize that faith wasn't a thing they had, it was something they did. It was in the walking, the freezing, the lighting of candles, the sharing of bread, in a world where every day could be your last. Faith wasn't about answers, it was about continuing anyway. Historians sometimes say that medieval religion was born from fear, of death, of hell, of hunger. Maybe that's true, but sitting here, in this little room filled with warmth and laughter, you see something different. Their faith was an act of tenderness, a way to make meaning out of misery, to find beauty in endurance. The father leans back, satisfied, And the mother begins to hum again, the same hymn she sang on the road. The children join in, their small voices uneven but sweet. The sound fills the cottage like new light, rising above the crackle of the fire. Above the storm. Outside, the snow keeps falling, steady and silent. Inside, the warmth of faith and family glows brighter than ever. You can almost feel it radiating from the walls, soft and invisible, like something eternal trying to touch the mortal world. And as the last notes of the hymn fade into the night, you understand. Winter may rule the land, but faith, in God, in each other, in the coming of spring, rules the heart. By evening, the storm has eased. The sky outside is a deep velvet blue, the snow glittering under a rising moon. Inside, the fire glows strong again, its warmth filling every corner of the cottage. The day's work is done. The tools are put away, and for the first time in days, no one moves with urgency. It's a night for stories, the kind that make the cold seem far away. The father sits close to the hearth, sharpening a small knife, his eyes reflecting the firelight. The children gather around, pressing in tight, wrapped in their blankets. The mother threads wool onto her spindle, spinning quietly, the whir of it blending with the crackle of the fire. There's a comfort in these sounds, the sound of survival made musical. "Tell us a story," one of the children says, voice soft but insistent. The father smiles, his teeth flashing in the firelight. "A story?" he says. "A story for winter." Then, he leans closer, lowers his voice, and begins. "There was once a spirit," he says, "born from the first breath of winter. She was made of frost and moonlight and liked to wander through the fields at night. Touching everything she saw, her touch froze the rivers, the branches, the stones, everything, except the hearts of those who shared their fire." The children listen, eyes wide, their faces glowing orange from the fire. "If she found a home without light," he continues, "she would slip through the cracks, curl around the sleepers, and whisper, 'You forgot the fire?' And by morning, the hearth would be cold, the house silent. The youngest shivers and pulls the blanket tighter. The father chuckles softly. But if she found a home with warmth, not just the fire, but warmth shared between people, she'd leave a gift. A single ice crystal shaped like a star. On the windowsill, a promise that spring would come." The mother glances up from her spinning. "And did she ever leave you one?" she asks, a smile teasing at the corners of her lips. The father shrugs. "Maybe she did," he says. "Maybe that's why the fire never goes out." The children giggle, but the room feels different now, cozier. Somehow, as if the story itself has wrapped them in another layer of warmth. You can almost see the flicker of imagination in their eyes, the frost spirit gliding silently through the dark, searching for light. Stories like this were more than entertainment, they were survival tools. They explained the unexplainable, taught caution, offered hope. Historians say that tales like these, of spirits, saints, and mysterious forces, helped people make sense of their fragile world. When you can't control nature, you give it a name. When the night feels too long, you fill it with voices. You glance toward the window, where frost has crept in thin, branching veins across the hide. It does look like something alive, delicate, deliberate. Maybe the old stories weren't wrong after all. Maybe warmth and cold really are living things, locked forever in a quiet struggle. The mother sets down her spindle and stirs the fire. The sparks leap upward like tiny stars, mirroring the frost patterns on the window. The air smells of wood smoke, wool, and a faint sweetness from the stew pot simmering on the edge of the hearth. For a brief moment, the line between reality and story blurs. The father begins another tale, this one about a knight who tried to fight winter with a sword of flame. He thought he could scare away the cold, the father says, his tone light but serious. He burned all his wood in one night, made his house bright as day. But when morning came, the fire was gone, and winter laughed. You can't fight the cold, he says, you must outlast it. The children nod solemnly, as if absorbing some great truth. You realize these tales aren't just fantasy, they're philosophy. Disguised as bedtime, lessons in patience, humility, and endurance. The mother hums softly as he speaks, weaving her own melody through his words. The sound is low, soothing, timeless. The fire crackles in rhythm, and for a while, it feels like the whole room is breathing together, human and flame. Warmth and story, all part of the same heartbeat. Outside, the frost spirit, or maybe just the wind, brushes against the shutters, making them creak. No one flinches. The family is too deeply wrapped in the spell of the night. The father finishes his tale quietly, and so the knight learned that you don't fight winter. You endure it with courage, kindness, and a good story. Laughter ripples through the room. The children lean against each other, their eyelids drooping. The mother takes the spindle off her lap, sets it aside, and pulls a blanket over the youngest. The father leans back, his eyes heavy, the glow of the fire painting his face in bronze and shadow. You can feel the peace in the room, fragile but real. Like a flame cupped between hands. The cold outside presses closer. But it cannot enter. Not tonight. Not while the hearth still breathes. And stories still burn in the air. Historians might call it folklore. But you, sitting here in the firelight, would call it something else, grace. The kind that comes when people, against all odds, find light in the dark. The mother hums one last note. The father's voice fades into silence. The wind sighs outside, as if admitting defeat, and as the fire settles into its slow, glowing rhythm, you think, maybe warmth was never about firewood or furs at all. Maybe it was always about stories, small, flickering flames passed from one soul to another, keeping the night at bay. The morning comes quietly again, but something feels different. The smell of smoke is heavier, richer, the kind that seeps into your clothes, your skin, your memory. It's the smell of survival, of effort, of another night endured. You blink awake beside the dying fire. The room hazy with warmth and ash. The walls are dark with soot, streaked from years of burning wood, years of refusing to freeze. When you rise, you brush your fingers along one of the beams above the hearth. The wood is blackened smooth, polished not by time, but by smoke. The scent clings to you, thick and familiar. It's not pleasant, exactly, but it's comforting. The smell of smoke means the fire lived through the night. And if the fire lived, so did you. The family begins to move around you, each person finding their rhythm again. The father adds wood to the coals, coaxing them into flame. The mother opens the door for a moment, letting in a blast of icy air that cuts through the smoky haze. The contrast is almost shocking, the clean, sharp cold meeting the thick, warm air of the room. It's like inhaling two seasons at once. You realize how strange it must have been to live in that constant cloud of smoke. There were no chimneys in most cottages, only a hole in the roof. Barely enough to vent the worst of it. The smoke gathered thickly near the ceiling, staining everything black, curling into your hair and clothes. Historians note that medieval villagers often coughed, their throats raw from the fumes, their eyes watering as they worked near the fire. And yet, they endured. They preferred smoke to frost. You imagine sitting there, eyes stinging, blinking through the haze, every breath tastes of wood and ash, every meal flavored by it. Even sleep comes with the faint scent of burning. You'd never escape it. It would follow you outside, cling to your hands, your hair, your skin. If someone met you on the road, they'd know exactly where you lived. The smoke itself was your identity. But strangely, they didn't complain. The smoke was life. Without it, there would be no warmth, no cooked food, no protection from the endless winter. And besides, it had its own kind of poetry. The way it curled and danced. The way it filled the rafters like soft clouds. When the sun broke through the window hide, it lit up the air, turning the smoke into ribbons of gold. Beauty, even here, found its way through the soot. The father steps outside again, his cloak trailing ash behind him. You follow, stepping into the cold, the smoke still lingering on your clothes like a shadow of warmth. The snow crunches beneath your boots, the world bright and blinding. Behind you, the chimney hole exhales a thin line of gray into the sky. The smoke twists and drifts, joining the low clouds above the field. You realize then that every house in the village is marked by the same faint trail of survival. From afar, they look like tiny beacons, quiet signatures saying, "We're still here." Inside, the mother is cleaning near the hearth, sweeping the ashes into a small pile. She doesn't waste them. Ash has value. Mixed with water, it becomes lye for washing, scattered in the garden. It enriches the soil. Even the remnants of fire have purpose. Nothing in this world can afford to be useless. The children help, though mostly they play, drawing shapes in the soot with their fingers, giggling when their faces get streaked black. The mother pretends to scold them, but her smile gives her away. The firelight softens her expression, makes her eyes glow. It's fascinating. You think, how something as grimy as soot could become a kind of blessing. Without realizing it, the smoke and ash kept them safe, sealing the thatch against insects, drying the walls, even preserving meat hung near the rafters. The very thing that made them cough also made their home last longer. Life in winter was full of contradictions like that, pain serving purpose, hardship holding beauty. The father returns with more wood. His hands are rough, his face streaked with frost and soot. He looks tired, but alive. The mother wipes a smudge from his cheek and shakes her head. "You're more smoke than man," she says. He grins, unbothered. "Then I'll never freeze." They laugh, quietly, the sound mingling with the crackle of the rekindled fire. The air fills again with that familiar haze, a curtain of heat and memory. You breathe it in, the taste earthy, raw, real. Historians still argue about the long-term effects of living in smoke-filled homes, the coughing, the lung problems, the endless irritation. And yet, they also note how strangely enduring those people were. Perhaps their bodies adapted. Perhaps their spirits simply refused to surrender. Either way, they lived through winters that would send most of us running for modern heat within hours. You sit back down by the hearth, feeling the smoke wrap around you like a heavy cloak. The fire pops softly, sending sparks drifting upward into the gray air. You watch one spark rise, twist, fade, gone, but never wasted. It becomes part of the same smoke that carried warmth out of this small cottage and into the sky. The smell, the haze, the soot, they're all part of the same language of survival. Each breath they take is half warmth, half smoke. Each cough is a hymn to endurance. You close your eyes and imagine sleeping in that world, breathing it in, night after night. The smoke is in your lungs, your clothes, your dreams, but so is the fire. And maybe, just maybe, that's the secret of why they endured. The fire didn't just warm their homes, it lived inside them. A slow, smoky light that refused to die. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, the hearth sighs, tired, steady, immortal. The snow has stopped again, leaving the world blank and still. But inside the cottage something is stirring, the slow drip of melting frost. You hear it first from the roof, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like a shy visitor knocking. The ice that gathered along the rafters has begun to weep under the weak morning sun. You look up and see where the thatch has sagged slightly. Dark patches spreading as the warmth inside pushes back against the cold above. The mother notices too. She sighs, sets down her spindle, and fetches a small bucket. It leaks again, she mutters, though not with anger, just weary acceptance. It always leaks, sooner or later. A droplet falls, landing in the bucket with a tiny plink. Then another, then another. The sound becomes part of the room, a soft percussion beneath the crackle of the fire. When the roof leaks, there's not much to do but move the bucket and laugh about it. The father shakes his head, adjusting the bucket's position with practiced precision. She's getting old, he says. Meaning the house. The mother smirks. So are you. He chuckles, the sound rough but warm. You can almost feel their exhaustion, the kind that isn't despair, but endurance worn thin. Life in winter was like that. Not dramatic survival, but constant negotiation. Fix the leak, patch the hole, shift the straw, wait for the sun, repeat. The children, of course, find it all fascinating. They gather around the bucket, watching the drips as if it's some rare performance. The youngest sticks out a finger to catch one. Cold, he squeals, and the laughter that follows fills the cottage with a sound brighter than the fire itself. Sometimes, the leaks get worse. The thaw brings as many problems as the frost. The melting snow finds cracks in the roof and slips through like a mischievous spirit. The straw that once insulated now sags heavy with water. The mother climbs a stool, trying to push it back into place with the broom handle. Bits of straw raining down onto her shoulders. The father holds the stool steady, muttering good-natured complaints about thatch that drinks more than I do. The children giggle again, and you realize something beautiful in their laughter. They've learned how to live with the cold, not against it. Each inconvenience becomes a joke, each failure a story. That's how people survived centuries of winter, not with endless strength, but with humor sharp enough to cut through the frost. Outside, the thaw continues. You can hear the faint trickle of water beneath the ice, the hidden streams waking beneath the snow. The father steps out to check the roof from outside. He squints up at it, the sunlight glinting off the ice. A few drops hit his face. He wipes them away, smirking. Even the roof's crying for spring, he says when he returns inside. The mother rolls her eyes but smiles. Let her cry, she says, stirring the pot on the fire. At least it means she's alive. That's the strange truth of it. Even the leaks are a sign of life. Frozen things don't cry. The drip from the ceiling means warmth has done its work. That the world is softening again, even if just a little. The cold might win the nights, but the fire and the people who tend it always win the mornings. Historians write about medieval architecture and its flaws, the thatch roofs that leaked, the drafty walls, the dirt floors that turned to mud in thaw. But what they can't record is the sound, the music of living through imperfection. The hiss of melting snow, the sigh of smoke curling upward, the laughter echoing under low ceilings. Those were the real notes of winter. As the day passes, the leaks slow, the fire dries the air, and the bucket fills halfway. The mother empties it outside, watching the steam rise where the warm water meets the snow. She lingers for a moment, squinting toward the horizon. The sunlight catches in her eyes, soft and gold. Inside, the children have turned the leak into a game. They've placed pebbles in the bucket and listened to how the drops hit them, each one making a different tone. It's music, one says proudly. The father grins. Then play us a tune, little minstrel. For a moment, the cold doesn't matter. The fire crackles, the roof hums, the air smells of damp straw and smoke. You can almost feel time pause, the centuries melting away until only this remains: a small house, a small fire, a family refusing to surrender to the season. As night returns, the roof still drips a little, but no one minds. The bucket stays where it is, half full, glinting in the firelight like a small mirror of the moon outside. The family eats, talks, laughs, and the sound of the water keeps time, slow, steady, patient. You watch it all, realizing that even in hardship, they've found rhythm, a way to turn discomfort into ritual, flaw into melody. That's what warmth really is. Not the absence of cold, but the harmony that grows in spite of it. When you finally close your eyes, the last thing you hear is the drip of melted snow, soft, rhythmic, eternal, the sound of winter loosening its grip, one drop at a time. The morning begins not with cold, but with sound, a new one, a drip, louder than before. Then another, and another. Faster now, like tiny bells. You sit up, startled for a moment. Before realizing what's happening, the thaw has truly begun. The frost is breaking. Outside, the air smells different, not sharp, not metallic, but soft and earthy, as if the world itself has decided to exhale. The snow that once blanketed everything is shrinking into small, glittering mounds. Water runs in thin silver veins along the dirt path, trickling into puddles that reflect the weak but welcome sunlight. The father opens the door and steps out into the brightness. Squinting, the light is almost painful after so many gray days. He stands still for a long moment, breathing deeply. It smells alive, he says quietly. And it does. That faint scent of thawed earth, wet wood, and smoke drifting from every chimney in the village. You follow in your imagination, feeling the snow give slightly under your boots, hearing the first creaks of the trees as they stretch in the warmer air. Somewhere nearby, a raven calls, harsh, startling, and glorious. Life, small and stubborn, is stirring again. Inside the cottage, the mood has changed. The fire burns low now, less fierce, as if it too knows the worst has passed. The mother opens the shutters fully for the first time in weeks, letting light spill across the room. Dust dances in the air like tiny spirits freed from darkness. The children clap at the sight of sunlight and run to the door, their laughter echoing against the thawing walls. Outside, the stream that runs near the field has begun to sing again, the ice cracking, water rushing beneath it like veins waking under skin. The sound is mesmerizing, a kind of music no one had heard for months. The children crouch beside it, poking at the edges with sticks, watching shards of ice float downstream. The father calls for caution, but his voice lacks urgency. Even he can't help but smile. The animals sense it too. The cow stands near the open barn door, her breath steaming less heavily. The chickens emerge hesitantly, pecking at patches of bare earth. Even the family dog, shaggy and smoke-scented, rolls joyfully in the slush, utterly unbothered by the mess. The world feels reborn, in small, careful ways. You can almost hear the thoughts that must have passed through their minds. We made it. Not shouted, not even spoken, but carried in the rhythm of their movements. In the way they walk slower, breathe deeper, look up more often. It's not triumph, it's relief. The father begins repairing the fence near the field, humming something tuneless. His hands move easily, almost lazily, as though each swing of the hammer is a celebration. The mother hangs the blankets outside to air them out, their damp weight swaying gently in the breeze. The smoke that rises from the chimney is thinner now, cleaner, like the air itself has been forgiven. Historians write that the first thaw of spring in medieval villages was a near spiritual event, not just weather, but deliverance. People celebrated quietly, as if afraid to startle the season away. They'd bring out the last of their stored food and share it. Light candles, or leave small offerings at the edge of the fields. Gratitude was the truest warmth of all. You stand with them, watching the light bend over the landscape. The snow gleams and glows, melting into rivulets that weave through the fields like veins of silver. The sound of dripping water surrounds you, steady and hypnotic. It's almost like applause, the earth itself clapping for those who endured. Inside the house, the fire crackles softly, no longer desperate but companionable. The walls still hold the smell of smoke, but it's fading now, replaced by the scent of damp wood and the faint sweetness of melting straw. The family moves easily through the small space, their motions lighter. The mother hums again, a tune you've heard her sing before. But this time it's slower, gentler. The father sits down at last, stretching his tired legs toward the fire. "Do you hear that?" he asks no one in particular. The others pause. The only sounds are the dripping from the eaves, the creak of thawing beams, and the distant rush of water. "It's the sound of the world waking up," he says, smiling faintly. The mother nods, her eyes soft, and the sound of the cold finally letting go. For a while, No one speaks. They just listen, to the thaw, to the breath of the house, to their own quiet hearts beating in rhythm with the world outside. Historians might reduce it to climate patterns, temperature shifts, or seasonal labor cycles. But here, in this moment, the thaw is more than a natural event. It's a resurrection, a reminder that even the longest winter has an ending. Even the deepest cold can't hold forever. The children, restless, start to play again. They scoop handfuls of melting snow and mold them into small creatures, a bird, a rabbit, a man with a crooked grin. They laugh when the figures collapse, but build them again anyway. As if to say, the point isn't how long it lasts, but that it existed at all. When the sun dips low, the light turns golden, catching on the wet roofs and glistening fields. The air hums with quiet joy. Inside the cottage, the fire burns just enough to keep the chill at bay. The father leans back, the mother rests her hands in her lap, and the children curl close together, their laughter fading into murmurs. The roof still drips a little, steady and soft, but no one minds anymore. Each drop is a heartbeat, each trickle a song. And as you sit there in the fading glow, watching smoke curl lazily into the warm twilight, you understand. The fire didn't conquer the winter. It endured it, and somehow, that was victory enough. Evening falls again, but this time it feels different. The air carries a new gentleness, cool, but not cruel. The sky blushes in shades of rose and amber as the sun sinks behind the thawing fields. And for the first time in months, the horizon isn't buried in gray. You step outside the cottage, the snow now soft beneath your boots, and breathe in the scent of wet earth and wood smoke mingling in the twilight. It smells like the end of something, and the beginning of something else. Behind you, the chimney sighs a thin ribbon of smoke, curling lazily into the softening sky. Inside, the familiar rhythms continue. The mother stirring the evening stew, the father humming under his breath as he repairs a cracked handle. The children whispering to each other about the world that will soon bloom again. The cottage feels alive in a new way, less like a fortress against the cold, and more like a heart slowly remembering how to beat freely. You sit by the door and listen. The steady drip of melting ice has become a constant chorus now, joined by the distant murmur of running water. Somewhere in the fields, a stream has broken free, laughing its way toward the river. The sound fills you with a peace so deep it almost aches. The family gathers at the table, the fire glowing behind them, not a desperate blaze this time, but a quiet companion. The father raises a wooden cup, not in ceremony, but in gratitude, to the fire. He says softly, smiling, and to those who kept it alive. They drink, their laughter gentle but sure. The mother sets the stew on the table, thin, but fragrant, rich with the promise of the first green herbs she's found beneath the snow. The children eat hungrily, their cheeks flushed from warmth, not whined. Every spoonful feels like triumph. Outside, the light fades into silver. The snow that remains glows faintly, reflecting the rising moon. It's almost as if the world itself is exhaling, releasing the long-held breath of winter. You can feel it, the weight lifting, the stillness loosening its grip. The father leans back, his voice thoughtful. It's strange, he says, how the cold makes you remember what matters. Fire, food, family. Nothing else seems so important when the world tries to freeze you. The mother nods, her eyes reflecting the firelight. And kindness, she adds. Warmth doesn't last unless it's shared. He smiles. Then we've done well enough. You realize he's right. They have. The winter took almost everything: wood, food, strength, but not spirit. That, somehow, grew even stronger in the frost. The children finish their meal and drift toward the hearth. The youngest curls up against the family dog, who's already half asleep, tail twitching in some dream of chasing warmth itself. The older child watches the fire, the orange glow reflected in wide eyes, and whispers, "Do you think spring will really come?" The father chuckles softly. "It always does," he says. "She just takes her time." And then, silence. A soft, content kind of silence. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. The fire murmurs low, the logs collapsing gently into embers. You watch the flames sway. No longer wild, just steady, a heartbeat that's done its work. Historians like to measure seasons in months and temperatures. But for people like this, winter wasn't a date, it was an ordeal. A teacher, a mirror. It stripped away everything unnecessary until only what mattered remained. The lesson was simple and brutal: you endure, or you perish. And somehow, they always chose endurance. You look around the cottage one last time. The soot-darkened beams, the patched walls, the worn tools hanging neatly by the door. It's not beautiful in the way of palaces or cathedrals, but it's sacred all the same. Every burn mark, every stain, every repaired crack tells the story of those who refused to let the cold win. The fire settles into its final glow. The mother drapes a blanket over the children and sits beside them, her head nodding slowly towards sleep. The father stands by the door for a moment, looking out into the moonlit field. You can see his breath rising, soft and silver, as he gazes across the land that almost conquered him, and didn't. When he finally steps back inside and closes the door, the sound is gentle, final, complete. The family sleeps. The fire burns low. The night hums quietly, its sharpness gone, replaced by something softer, a promise in the air. You sit a while longer, listening. The crackle fades. The world outside sighs. The last ember glows, dim and patient, until even that light softens into shadow. And as the cottage settles into silence, you whisper to yourself, or maybe to the ghosts of winters long past, "You made it." The fire doesn't answer, but it doesn't need to. Its warmth lingers, invisible now, threaded through the smoke-stained air and the memories of all who once huddled close. It's the kind of warmth that never really dies, it just becomes part of the walls. The earth, the story. The wind outside is gentle. The stars shimmer faintly. The cold still exists, but it no longer matters. You breathe deeply, let the quiet wash over you, and close your eyes. The fire hums once more, low and kind, a lullaby for the weary, the living, the survivors of the frost. And as the world grows softer, you feel your mind drift with the smoke, fading into the slow rhythm of sleep. The story of warmth, of fire, of faith, of life, ends here, where spring is already waiting behind the horizon. End of script. Sweet dreams.